Welcome back everyone for a high-flying Cobra Kai Season 5 watch party. We're here today to talk about one of the most awesome, badass characters in all of storytelling, Hawk. To date, he still has the widest and most compelling arc out of any character in the show. He's gone from shy nerd with no self-confidence to badass fighter who's scoring the hot babe. He falls in love with the idea of aggression, realizing it can get him more and more of what he wants, until he loses sight of who he is in the first place. He was attacking his own friends because they now stood in his way. He eventually let up and scaled back, realizing the endless aggression was taking him down a dark and angry path. He found a little solace in the new life until his confidence got cut away, literally. Only after losing the hair was he able to connect the personality, not with an abstract quality, but to who he really is. It was enough to get him back with the hot babe and focus on kicking ass. He came back and won the All Valley tournament against a somewhat distracted Robbie. But who cares, it didn't matter. He was the champ. Nothing could ever take that away. Now enter Season 5. Whoops, right away there's a problem. They ran out of story for Hawk. See, the past 4 seasons brought us that incredible story we just went through. The problem is, now it was done. He flipped the script, went too far, came back from the edge, lost it all, then flipped the script again. It was awesome, but it was also done. There's no more. What happens next? The show must go on. Well, the answer is, unfortunately, not much. It's actually a problem that affects both Hawk and Dimitri. Season 5 doesn't have a whole lot for either of them to do. The focus on the show is elsewhere. So Hawk and Dimitri now reluctantly join Chris and Mitch, Bert and Nate, and Moon and Yasmin as characters the show has sort of moved past. They're like the Olive Garden leftovers sitting in the fridge. Yeah, you could reheat them and it'd probably taste good enough, but wouldn't you rather eat something new? Gianni even got bumped out of the regular cast, down to special guest star. Distinctions like that don't really make a big difference to the audience, but it serves as a sign for where the show is going. Anyway, the two of them are only in one scene the first 2 episodes. That's when Daniel shuts down the dojo. So yeah, it's not a whole lot, but it picks up a little in episode 3. Hawk updates his tattoo, and then the gang helps Miguel dissect the mysterious ways of girls. Ah, fuck. Well, first off, this plotline is 100% Miguel's story. Hawk and Dimitri are just there. There's really no challenge or adventure for them. They're just giving out advice. That's not a bad thing per se. Obviously, every character will be a part of someone else's story at some point. The real problem is this may be the weakest story the show has ever done. I'm referring to the girls over here talking about what to say Miguel, and then the guys back here talking about what to say to Sam. While this has always been a half-hour show and incredibly funny at times, for the very first time, now, it actually feels like a sitcom. And to be honest, I mean that in the worst possible way. All the humor and comedic elements have always felt so fresh. Sure, it was always a little fish out of water with Johnny, but the uniqueness just made everything pop. I mean, this is garbage. You've seen this a dozen times already. You know where the guys are on one side, the girls are over there, they're all giving advice, good and bad, and it's all just the biggest thing in the world. Writers have been using this plotline for decades. So yeah, Dimitri and Hawk are here, but it's mostly a waste. Now the first time Hawk really has any story of his own is episode 4. Finally, it's a little something. It starts when Hawk steps in to tell Kenny and the Cobra Kais to back off. Kenny, who is in a position very similar to Season 3 Hawk, won't back down. Instead, he antagonizes him. He trash talks. He even brings up when they cut Hawk's hair, as if he was the one who did it. But he wasn't even there when it happened. That's the best example of someone who's living a fantasy more than his own reality. He's bringing up the actions others have done and trying to pull street cred from them. Now it's worth Hawk has been here before. He is proud and doesn't back down. He dishes a little back. Hawk isn't going to lose control, but he's also going to keep his self-respect. Now flash forward to the race. Hawk accepts a sabotaged tube from Kenny and loses. Obviously, the script makes Hawk a little naive. It's not like he had to take a tube from Kenny to begin with. Plus, he conveniently doesn't notice any problems until he's already going down the slide. He confronts Kenny and goads him into striking, while Hawk easily dodges and blocks the hits. As to be expected, Kenny does land a shot somehow. It is unbecoming of the Hawk. He hits Kenny's leg and then gets shoved in by Robbie. All in all, it's bad for Hawk. He ends as the loser of the race, which he could have avoided, taking a punch from Kenny and getting pushed in by Robbie. So for Hawk's first real episode of the season, he's getting knocked around a lot. You may even say Hawk is getting nerfed. The character we know and we've come to love would have seen this coming. Sure, you can claim it's overconfidence, but the show doesn't really lean into that either. It's just plot reasons. The show needs to build up Kenny, and in order to do that, he needs to take someone else down with a higher skill level. That ends up being Hawk. And that makes you say, what happened to this character? But then what? Not much. Hawk isn't in episode 5 and only at the end of episode 6. He doesn't even have any lines. Dimitri is in neither of those episodes. Ultimately, the story has moved on, like I said. It's a double-edged sword, really. It would be weak and redundant to keep rehashing the same story of the previous seasons. The story does need to move forward. But then what does a show with a large cast do with characters it doesn't really need anymore? It treads waters. The characters are there, but they aren't doing much. That's happened to so many of the other students in the dojos. It's also a great summary for what happens in episode 7. Hawk and Dimitri are part of the Protect the Egg training, but they don't really do much or contribute. They're just there. This story is about other characters. There's one moment where Dimitri reminds Hawk and Robbie they're both ex-Cobra Kai. It's decent, but also mostly just tying up loose ends from the previous season. Episode 8 is really where most of the shit goes down. The competition for the Sekai Taikai is on. It starts basic enough. There's cool moves and moments of training. This scene shows how Hawk, Miguel, and Robbie are essentially on equal terms. Each is a badass fighter in his own right. Robbie and Miguel agreed Hawk should fight. I think this is really more about their storyline and coming together than it is about Hawk, though clearly they think Hawk can and should win. At the fight, we see Hawk and Robbie have even moved past their differences and are working together. It's subtle, but the show is wrapping up the plot lines. It's not really a big moment for Hawk because in the end it was all mostly in the background. Plus, Hawk already won last season, so the story is more about Robbie making amends with him and Hawk accepting that. Now, as for the fight itself, this is where the show runs into a problem that had been coming all season. It's about the balance of the characters. They've been moving more and more of their main characters to Miyagi-Do, to the point where there are almost no main characters left in Cobra Kai. Well, it's hard to build an exciting fight scene against two very unmatched fighters. You expect Hawk to win. He's been training hard and kicking ass since season 1. Except, well, the story really needs Kenny to win. A few years ago, I pointed out that more than any other character in the show, Hawk was on a sliding scale of power. His skill as a fighter is directly related to whatever the plot requires at the moment. He's going from hanging with the best to losing to Dimitri, to kicking everyone's ass, to getting tied down, to winning the All Valley. He's all over the place. But now, against a new fighter, well, so the show has tried to establish Kenny as fast and maybe a little unpredictable. But you would think an experienced fighter would use his height and reach advantage to neutralize that. As it is, it never really comes up. Now, Hawk does get a great hit that is negated by the ref claiming Kenny was out of bounds. Now, ultimately, Kenny uses the Silver Bullet, the new move to knock the wind out of your opponent. It's essentially part of Quicksilver. So yeah, Kenny has a secret move that really isn't much more than a punch to the chest. As a far superior fighter, Hawk could have kept Kenny away, and he certainly could still block the hit. But he didn't. He took a hit to the chest and lost it. He was nerfed. Now, Jacob has said that maybe Hawk needs to get humbled a little. I can get that, except that's a storyline we never really got. If season 5 had Hawk riding high from his win and it gets to his head, he grows overconfident, all of that could be a good storyline. That would be like the beginning of Rocky 3. Rocky was the champ, he kept winning fights, it went to his head. He ended up losing to a fierce, determined Clubber Lang. But we didn't actually get that. It's just pure conjecture, something we're making up. It makes sense, but it's not really in the show. Like the night before Miguel and Robbie picked Hawk to fight, and he was surprised and honored by that. If instead he said, of course I should fight, I'm the champ, it would at least support the idea of Hawk being humbled. But that's not what happened. Now you could also argue the biased ref was part of the situation. Hawk probably could have continued fighting, he just needed a moment to catch his breath. Instead, the ref called the match. Couldn't they just have someone else fight in Hawk's place? Is the Sekai Takai going to be determined by a disqualification? This brings us to perhaps the biggest logic flaw in the whole season. The selection committee is observing the dojos to see if they can compete in the Sekai Takai. Ultimately, who they choose is their power alone. They brought in an outside referee who is supposed to be neutral. That makes sense, but it doesn't mean they are bound to his decisions or whoever wins these sparring matches. Like, the ref is clearly making bad call after bad call. The board is right there watching the whole thing. They would recognize that as well. If they think the fight wasn't fair, or maybe the losing fighter did really well, they can still invite that dojo to the tournament. If they think someone else can step in for Hawk, then why not? They can do whatever the freak they want. Not to mention, it was all even more obvious in the girls' fight. Now in the final few episodes, Hawk and Dimitri had some moments. They helped convince Stingray to talk. They used their brain power to get the clips from the server. They also participated in the big fight at the end. That is sort of par for the course. They were part of the team, not fulfilling any of their own unique storyline. Hawk took a step down this season. It was a real shame to see it happen. While we don't know what's coming next, we hope he will get a more proper storyline and make a true comeback as the ultimate badass. I'm going to look at the Chosen and Silver fight next because that is too awesome to let be. Have a great day. I'll see you at the next watch party.